Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back. We start with item 9, which is the draft Corporate Delivery and Improvement Plan 24-25, and Claire Mailer, the Director of Strategy, People and Resources, is going to introduce the report.
Thank you, Provost, and good afternoon, councillors. The report before you today is the draft Corporate Delivery and Improvement Plan for 24-25. This is the first time that we've brought this report to Council. As you are aware, it's a new approach that we've introduced as part of the new performance reporting and strategic planning arrangements, which we have been developing to ensure greater alignment with the new corporate plan and indeed our new strategic operating model. The Corporate Delivery and Improvement Plan complements the annual performance report, which we brought to you in August. This is the look forward document to be read alongside the look back that the annual performance report offers. The Corporate Delivery and Improvement Plan replaces the previous service level approach to identifying improvements, which was in place through our service BMIPs. Those were the business management and improvement plans for each service area of the council. This allows us to present improvements at an organisational level to give council the opportunity to see the overall focus for the year ahead more easily. We have also changed the timing for bringing these improvements to you. BMIPs were brought to committees partway through the same year in which the activity was taking place. With the CDIP, we are taking a look further ahead, bringing it to you now in a draft form on the same agenda as the medium-term financial plan to strengthen the connection between the priorities set within our corporate plan, improvement activity to achieve these, and indeed to consider how resources are invested. There will be engagement with elected members on the contents of this draft CDIP as part of the budget preparation process in the coming weeks and months. Together with community feedback on our annual budget priorities consultation, we really hope that this will help councillors when making budget decisions going forward. Once the budget has been set, the CDIP will be reported back to council for final approval. And in addition to the draft CDIP, we're also asking council to approve the one additional performance measure and 3 replacement performance measures to our corporate plan framework. You will see that these are detailed within Appendix 2 with the reasons for each proposed change. Charlene, myself and other officers will be happy to take any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions on the report? Councillor Allen.
Thank you for the presentation, the report, and thank you, convener. On page 152, there's a thing about tackling poverty, and it's under prevent and mitigate impacts of poverty for children living in Perth and Kinross. I've asked the question before and I got an answer, so I'm going to slightly change it. Is there an intention to move to giving all primary school children free school meals? If there is, when will we be doing that? And if not, can we have some explanation as to why that might be? Thank you.
Sheena Devlin.
Thank you, Provost. In relation to the question about the rollout, if I've understood Councillor Allen correctly, of universal free school meals, my understanding is that it will be within the lifetime of the current Scottish Parliament that will happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Allen, your second question.
Thank you. And my second question is on page 157, under support and promote business growth and investment. It's suggesting what do we want to achieve, and it talks about increasing the number of businesses in the creative industry. I was just wondering how we were going to achieve this, given that Creative Scotland and the Arts Council have just had a £6.6 million cut from their budget. Thank you.
Barbara?
Okay, thank you. I can't comment on Councillor Allen in terms of Creative Scotland's budget cuts. And I think that probably will be an ongoing discussion. But in terms of the approach that we can take within Perth and Kinross, clearly there are a huge number of creative industries within the council area, which includes the work that's being done from the Creative Exchange, which is very focused on those kinds of businesses. And really, we just want to continue to coalesce all of those businesses, support emerging businesses, and use our UNESCO status as a city of craft as well to promote all of that.
Thank you very much. Councillor Peter Barrett.
I've got a question with regard to the prevent and mitigate impacts of child poverty on page 4, and it's the indicator at the top of that page. I just wanted to ask, how is the development of the overarching poverty strategy progressing, and is the target date that's set of March 2026 the correct target? Because 2.5 years hence seems pretty far in advance. And my second question was on the following page, and it's about the reducing dependency on food banks. There's an element of me thinks good luck with that at the present time, but I also wondered whether we needed to be looking at maybe slightly more different indicators in terms of the number of people helped through cash first type supports, or the value of cash first type supports that are provided.
Thank you. So in answer to the first question regarding the developing the overarching poverty strategy, as many councillors will be aware, and certainly those that sit on the anti-poverty task force, a few weeks ago we held a workshop with a range of key partners to really consider some of the challenges round and about poverty here in Perth and Kinross. So the small group, we've recently appointed a project management support manager for the anti-poverty task force, and that officer alongside our officers within the poverty team are working on a draft strategy at the moment, which will be considered through the anti-poverty task force. In relation to your question about the target date, thank you for that. Well spotted. It will be March of next year, so I'm not sure what happened with the target date there. In terms of reducing dependency on food banks, many of you will be aware of the Scottish Government guidelines that came out relatively recently with a real push to more cash first approaches. We have got a cash first working group that has been established, and we'll certainly take on board your feedback here in terms of the indicators to measure cash first. So that is helpful, and we'll have an opportunity for more detailed discussions as we go through consultation with elected members on these areas.
Thank you very much. Billy Ahern.
Thank you very much. My question is on page 162 of the report, and it's about improving support for children and young people with additional support needs to realise their potential, and the requirement to keep them in mainstream school settings. That's going to need either one of two options, and that's increasing the classroom assistance to keep them in a mainstream class, or it's going to require investment in the school estate to provide facilities in the schools that you can be used more for ASM pupils. And I look at the new Riverside School and the excellent facility that's been given there for additional support needs, but that was quite an investment in terms of that building, quite a large area in that building. So my question is, how do you propose to do that? Is it with an investment in the school estate and changing the schools? And is Perth High School, does that have a built-in provision for additional support, or is it going to be an increase in classroom assistance and help within the mainstream schools that is at the moment? Thank you.
Gina Devlin.
Thank you, Provost. I can pick that up. Bailey Ahern, I can confirm that we are quite well advanced in terms of planning ASN, and Additional Support Needs Transformation Programme, and our intention is to undertake a detailed briefing and presentation session with all elected members who would be interested in hearing more about that, because actually the reality is it won't be one or the other. It will be a combination of a range of different things, which will be around different approaches perhaps to staff training. It perhaps might be about additional staff. It will also be about not just new provision, but perhaps reconfiguration of existing provision. And so that transformation programme is currently being scoped out, but we don't want to complete that scoping until such time as we've been able to share the baseline information about additional support needs across Perth and Kinross with all elected members. And we know that Scrutiny and Performance Committee are considering undertaking a review around additional support needs, and we're in discussion with the convener and vice convener of Scrutiny and Performance about the best way to share that information with colleagues. So there will be an opportunity very shortly for all elected members to hear about that programme, and you'll see there that it's a multifaceted approach to transformation rather than just one approach or another. So happy to share more information at the appropriate time. Thank you.
Thank you. I look forward to the presentation.
Thank you. Councillor Forbes.
Thanks, Provost. I'm on page 157. My question's really largely general, although I'll use a specific. So we're going to make Perth a more competitive inward investment destination, and I wondered for that one and some of the others, do we have any targets that are set that we can measure against in the future?
Barbara Renton.
Yep, sorry, I'm just trying to put everything off so I could answer the question. Yes, sort of clearly we will work with our business partners, the sector representatives through the economic strategy which is being revised so that we can provide targets and benchmarking information where we can.
Thank you. Councillor Colin Stewart.
Thanks, Provost. Two questions. I'll follow up on Councillor Forbes's in a second, but I just wanted to check something very quickly, which looks a bit weird. On page 161 of our document pack, or page 13 of the draft plan, we've got a how will we know if we've been successful? Schools will have robust procedures to reduce bullying in line with improving relationships. I'm presuming that those are in place already.
Sheena Devlin.
There are already approaches in place, both in terms of procedures and guidance, Councillor Stewart, and those are currently subject to review and redraft. So it's that the third column along refers to the outcome of the review and redraft. It should not imply that there's currently nothing there. So apologies if that's how the plan reads. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Just a drafting thing then. But following up on Councillor Forbes's question, so I think he took that particular example about making Perth, presumably Perth and Kinross, a more competitive inward investment destination and getting a baseline there. But I think he was asking a more general question, which was going to be my question as well, about in terms of if we are using this as an improvement plan over the space of 24-25, then we won't know if we've improved unless we've got baselines in. So, for example, on page 156 or page 8 of the draft plan, an increase in observed biodiversity, biodiversity markers. So would officers be amenable to putting baseline targets in?
Barbara Renton. Oh, sorry, Claire Miller.
Yeah, I was just going to say I think it's a question for Claire.
Claire.
Yes, absolutely. We will be doing the baseline. So I think baseline data and information so that we can measure progress against the improvement actions will be absolutely key. So please be assured that that will be the case.
Thank you. Councillor Cuthbert.
Thank you, Provost. Just a quick question. I was pleased to hear about the ASN briefing and the change of the plan and so on. I'm just wondering roughly when that's going to be happening. Is that in the next month, year? Roughly when is that going to happen?
I can pick up on that,
Sheena
Councillor. Sorry, Provost, I can pick up on that, Councillor Cuthbert. My understanding is that there's either has been or perhaps it's next week that there's a meeting with the convener and vice convener of scrutiny and performance, and it will be at a point as soon as possible thereafter that we would intend to hold that session with all members. So my preference would be that that's certainly held before Christmas if possible. Thank you.
Billy Hearn.
Thank you. My second question is on page 167, and it's reducing waiting times for people to access mental health services. My understanding is that mental health services were taken out of the IJB and wholly under the control of the NHS. So to me, it's down to the NHS in order to reduce the waiting times. And I understand the issue at the moment is trying to get qualified consultants and staff within mental health services. And that's right across the country. So I just wonder what the plan is in trying to reduce the waiting times. Thank you.
Jackie Pepper, the Chief Officer, is going to answer this.
Thank you very much, Provost, and thanks for your question, Councillor Ahern. Bailey Ahern, sorry. You're quite right that in 2020 the responsibility for inpatient mental health services was transferred in terms of operational management responsibility to NHS Tayside and is managed within the functions of the executive team in NHS Tayside. But the local community mental health teams remain the responsibility of the Health and Social Care Partnership in Perth and Kinross. So it does require whole system collaboration and working because, as you quite rightly point out, the psychiatric support for that comes from the framework that we've just described in terms of inpatient services. That's where the consultants are managed. We have a Tayside-wide mental health and learning disabilities improvement programme that has a redesign of specialist community mental health services at its core as one of five key areas of focus. And yes, we're doing work locally to reduce the length of waiting lists, the length of time, and there has been some success in that reported to the IJB, some reductions, but recognising that the wait is still too long and there's a way to go. But there is a paper that was taken to the IJB providing all of the detail around that. So I hope that gives you some clarification of the responsibilities there, and that this remains a key focus for us locally.
We appear to have lost audio online. Oh, we have it back again. Okay. Claire, could you maybe pick up the question?
Just give me a second here. I think as Lisa just messaged about that, I understand it is, yeah. It is being paired as part of the overarching strategy, but we will get in Barbra's absence, we will get a more detailed answer to you. Apologies for that.
Sorry, because the sound went, I couldn't hear what the question was. So I am here, but because we couldn't hear online what it was.
Councillor Braun, would you like to repeat your question?
I'll do my best to remember what it was. We were looking at page 154 on the electric vehicle charging. We have a target date of March 2025, but I was just wondering, do we have an idea of how many charging points we intend to install and what the spread of those will be across the authority, particularly thinking about rural areas which do need more, I think.
Yeah, so a paper that was approved at the Climate Change and Sustainability Committee before recess outlined the Council's approach to electric vehicle charging, with it using Scottish Government funding to map all of that. So we're currently doing that with a view that wherever possible that these will be provided on a private basis, but understanding that in certain rural areas that there will be a requirement for council support or public-private partnership support for all of those. So that is currently being done, and we will bring back a strategy in terms of that and what the coverage across the whole of the council area will be in due course, Councillor Braun.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Robertson.
Thank you, Provost. Page 153, with regard to reducing the dependency on food banks, it's quite clear that more and more people, hard-pressed families and people, are using food banks almost as part of their ability to survive week to week. So can you say a little bit about the cash first partnerships that's featured in the report?
Thank you. Yes, and I think what I would stress is in terms of reducing dependency on food banks, that will be a long-term aim, and food banks will continue to exist until such time as sort of more enhanced measures in terms of cash first approaches have been introduced. But there are a range of different measures in terms of cash first approach, and very often that can be voucher schemes and different methods. And there is a cash first, as I said, working group that has been established to look at a range of different measures, how we can kind of move away from a dependency on food banks and provide people with sort of cash first approaches in the first instance. So that will be part of the detailed work that's undertaken.
Sorry, and will we have a follow-up report on how that is progressing?
Yes, we will. As part of that work, we will have some detailed information. In fact, we recently had a discussion about having an elected member briefing, and indeed maybe an elected member briefing session, not just on cash first approaches, but on some of the warm welcome activity that's underway. So we're planning to get that out before Christmas.
Thank you very much. I don't see any more questions, so therefore I'll invite Leader of the Council to move the report. Oh, sorry. Seem to have you on my chat here. Councillor Barrett, on you go.
Thanks, Provost. I think it was a bit further up. So a second question, I'm grateful for the opportunity to ask it, was regarding page 156 of the report, reducing carbon emissions caused by traffic in Perth city centre. And there's two measures identified there: the delivery of the Crosstail Link Road and preparing for phase 4 of the Perth Transport Futures. The deadline for that, or the date for that, is March 2025, which probably coincides with the completion of the CTLR in February 2025. But I just wanted to double check that there is no slippage with regard to the parallel work in terms of phase 4 with regard to the modelling of air quality, traffic movements, and capitalising on the reduced traffic volumes within the kind of Perth Dundee Road Scone corridor, that was still on track to happen over the next 6 to 12 months, as it says on the Perth Transport Futures website.
Barbara Renton.
Thank you, Provost. There are no delays that I'm aware of, Councillor Barrett.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll now ask the Leader of the Council to move the report.
Thanks, Provost. Provost, Baileys and fellow councillors, I'm pleased to move the Council's draft corporate delivery and improvement plan for 2024-25, setting out proposed improvement activity for the 2024-2025 year to deliver on the key priorities in our corporate plan. This is the first time we have been able to consider proposed improvement activity in this way, in one plan covering the whole council at a strategic level. The timing is also very important. In the past, we would only get the opportunity to look at planned improvements when we were already partway through the year they were going to be delivered in, and at a time when budget decisions had already been made. This draft improvement plan allows all members across the chamber to consider what activity is being proposed in the context of both the medium-term financial plan and as we start planning for the next year's budget. It underlines the importance of ensuring that in setting a balanced budget next year, we are also setting one which is targeted to deliver on the corporate plan priorities, which as councillors we have all unanimously agreed. In the coming months, we will have the opportunity to engage with officers about these improvement actions and whether they are the right ones, but I believe this presents a good starting point for those discussions. As I've said, I think this is an important step forward in the way that we report how our performance is, but it is only a starting point, and I'd like to thank all elected members and officers for the work that they've done to bring us to this point. And I'm sure that this will be a moving feast, and suggestions brought forward by elected members and officers will refine and improve the way that we deliver results and show where we are with our proposals. So I'm pleased to support the amendments that have already been suggested to the corporate plan indicators, which have been recommended to us today. These demonstrate the commitment I made from an early stage that this corporate plan needed to be regularly reviewed to ensure it remains relevant, and part of that is ensuring that we are measuring and receiving performance updates on the right things so that we can be satisfied that we are delivering on the priorities which we have committed to. Today, to hear the different questions on so many aspects of what we do as a council together it's hard for everybody to get all the information and the answers from officers in such a short time when we're time constrained. But the officers we have, I'm sure, will be willing to take questions offline that you have when you have more time to read these papers. I know how much information you have to absorb in 1 week. So I'm confident that officers will respond to any further questions you have after this meeting. And at that, I'm happy to move this report.
Thank you very much. Mr. Deputy Leader to second the report.
Colleagues, in the next paper this afternoon, we shall review this council's medium-term financial plan, which underpins pretty much everything that we do. To enable us all to keep our agreed corporate priorities in sharp focus alongside that financial plan, this draft corporate delivery and improvement plan for 24-25 is presented for council's approval. The appendix has set out clearly what improvements we want to achieve, how and by when we intend to make these improvements, and how we will measure how successful we have been able to be in tackling, in making progress in tackling poverty, tackling climate change, developing a resilient, stronger and greener economy, enabling our children and young people to achieve their full potential, protecting and caring for our most vulnerable people, promoting physical and mental well-being, and working in partnership with communities. I have no hesitation in seconding. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there, I have an amendment from Councillor Colin Stewart.
Thanks, Provost. We have it. Can I first of all really thank officers for bringing forward this report. As noted in the report, I think it's and as mentioned there, I think by Councillor Drysdale, it's really good to have this aligned with looking at the medium-term financial plan as well, but also as Councillor Lang mentioned, to propose to bring this back before the end of the financial year, so that it is a plan for the 24-25 year that will be up and running on day one of that financial year rather than waiting 2, 3, 4 months into the financial year before commencing it or before agreeing it. I really want to commend the way that the actual improvement activities in the draft plan have been laid out. I think they're really nice and clear. I think they're really concise. What I would like to suggest, though, just in, I did ask the question of Mrs. Mailer and got the commitment that we would have baselining. I think that because this is an improvement plan, it is a direction of travel. It will, in year 24-25, tell us where we want to get to, but we do need to know where we're starting from. So I think the first part of the amendment just addresses including baselines being set for each of the proposed improvement actions so that improvement can be objectively measured over the time frame of that year that the activity takes place in. And then the second part of the amendment is simply recognising the former scrutiny and now scrutiny and performance committee's role in scrutinising the previous service business management improvement plans and annual performance reports. Now that we have moved away from those business management improvement plans, to remit the committee to to consider this draft and recommend whether there are any additional targets that could be included, or indeed whether there are any that might be excluded. And I commend that to the Chamber.
Bailey.
Thank you. I was very happy to hear Councillor Lane's comments about how he has sympathy for this side of the chamber who only get to see these papers a week prior to the meeting. It's a very full agenda today, and that's why I'm happy to second Councillor Stewart's amendment, which will give us proper time to really dig into this, into the weeds of this in the way that only scrutiny can. So happy to second the amendment so we can have a real good deep dive into this. Thank you.
Thank you, Bailey. Councillor John Rebeck.
Thanks, Convener. Just a brief comment, since it was asked about in question with regards to additional support need by both Councillors Ahern and Councillors Cuthbert, quite appropriately, actually. And I think the tenor of the questions I'm entirely supportive of. I think as a team in Learning and Families, we have firmly nailed the colours to the mast of supporting additional support need. And I thank colleagues in the group, and in particular the council leaders, for their support in this so far. Saying it's one thing, doing it's another, and we know that, but we've already signalled our intent with what we did with the teacher strike money, which we did support in several different ways, albeit small but important steps in making this provision for additional support need better. There's no doubt that we need more support staff for our teachers. We need more of them. We need to support them better. We need to train them better. We need to find career pathways for them. But this will be a difficult road, and paper 10 will highlight why. I would love to have half a dozen Fairviews dotted about Perth and Kinross, and I'd love to have support for a teacher in every classroom, but that feels like it's a long way away, unfortunately. But there's no doubt that that will be the intent of this administration, insofar as we possibly can, will be to support additional support needs in our schools for many reasons, not just about moral compass, but actually it is related to bullying in our schools. It is related to the levels of violence and aggression that we have against our teaching staff, and they are related to adverse childhood experience as well. So I welcome the questions, and I can assure the questioners that it will be a focus of our team here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Rebeck. Bailey Ahern.
Thank you very much, Provost. I welcome this report, and it does lay out improvements across a wide range of services. There are improvements that will make a big difference to everyone, but in particular people that struggle to cope with daily lives in a variety of ways. I fully support the amendment and look forward to seeing the report coming back to this Council and reporting the progress that is made to achieving goals. And I pick up on Bailey's comment that we may not only get a week to see the papers, but if we're not on a particular committee, then we may miss this progress. And this is the right forum to monitor its progress. So I look forward to seeing the paper back again. But very good paper. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Bailey Ahern. Councillor Peter Barrett.
Thanks, Provost. I don't have any problem with the first part of the amendment put forward by Councillors Stewart and Bailey. Basically, I mean, a lot of the baselining information is already in this draft of the CDIP, and it would be illogical not to have as much baselining information as we can. I'm not entirely convinced about the need for the second part of the amendment, and I would want to know who the recommendations of any changes to the indicators, either to add more or remove the ones that we've already agreed today, is going to be made to. If it comes back to this council, then I might be minded to support it. But if it's just going to be a decision by scrutiny, then I certainly wouldn't. So.
I'm by no means consider myself an expert on this matter, so I'm going to come to others that can perhaps provide the guidance. I think I'm going to come to convener scrutiny first of all.
Thanks, Provost. Given that it's the final plan that's coming back to council in March, it would be recommendations for inclusions made by the committee in the intervening time frame. I wouldn't propose that Scrutiny and Performance Committee sets the targets, but just makes recommendations about them to full council.
Okay. Deputy Provost.
Thank you very much. I welcome the promotion of the National Entitlement Card for free bus travel as a means of tackling poverty and reducing travel costs. But I'm conscious already that we have a 50% take-up rate, I think, in Perth and Kinross of the entitlement card, which accounts for about 85% of journeys made by under 22s. But I was hearing yesterday that across Scotland, under 22 travel by bus is now at about 110% of pre-COVID levels. And so this is very welcome as a move to help reduce poverty, but also increase opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. I don't see any further requests for comments. I'm going to come to the Leader of the Council to sum up.
Just to, in summing up, all I really want to say is that I thank Councillor Barrett for getting clarity on part 2 of the amendment. I did read it as recommendations and that was what I read when it said recommend that targets, etc., would come forward. So I'm quite comfortable with taking the amendment into the motion and putting that becoming the full motion. As I said at the beginning of this administration, do not fear scrutiny. Scrutiny can only make us better, and the more that we look at things, the better results we'll get. So I'm quite happy for it to go to scrutiny, but on the basis that it's recommendations that come back to full council.
Thank you. Mr. Deputy Leader, are you also content?
Yep, happy to support.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Members, can we agree the revised motion? Thank you very much. Members, item 10 is the medium-term financial plan 2024 to 2030. I'm just going to say before I invite Mr. Mackenzie to talk to the report, a slight plea from me to try and minimise the political commentary that usually comes with our financial papers. I know it's very exciting and we're all going to recess at the end of the week, but if we can tone it down, I'm not going to say avoid it because that's impossible, but you know, please try and keep it managed. I'll give Mr. Mackenzie a second before I come to him.
Thank you, Provost, and good afternoon, Baileys and councillors. And just to pick up on the comments by my colleague Claire Mailer and also by councillors Lang and Drysdale, obviously this update to medium-term financial plan is brought alongside the draft corporate delivery and improvement plan to strengthen the alignment between the priorities set out in the corporate plan, the council's improvement activity and the budget resource allocation. The plan models optimistic, mid-range and pessimistic scenarios to provide an indication of a potential level of financial challenge facing the council over the next 6 years to 2029-30. In the overview report published in May
Audit Scotland noted that budget constraints and increasing cost pressures are putting councils' finances under severe strain. As members will be aware, several local authorities have recently reported on the difficult measures they are considering in managing their financial position. Against the background of high levels of inflation, anticipated constraints in funding, growth in the need for services, and cost of living impacts, Perth and Kinross Council is facing mounting pressure on its revenue and capital expenditure. The council can no longer afford to deliver services in the same way. In setting next year's budget, elected members will therefore need to determine how best to prioritise limited resources against the council's strategic objectives and consider different approaches to meeting the needs of local communities. The mid-range scenario, which is adopted for financial planning purposes, shows a potential requirement to reduce expenditure through savings and additional income by almost £95 million over the 6-year period to 2029-30. More immediately, the projected budget deficit for next year, 2024-25, after assumptions on council tax and fees and charges, is currently estimated at £27.6 million. Section 5 and 6 of the report provide an overview of the economic and fiscal outlook and the latest Scottish Government medium-term financial strategy, published in May of this year. The assumptions used in updating the medium-term financial plan are set out in Section 7 and appendices A and B to the report. The Council has an opening structural deficit on the 2024-25 revenue budget estimated at £11.954 million. This is built up over time and reflects the unwinding of £10 million of non-recurring funding used in setting the current year's budget, together with the impact of decisions made in respect of the 2024-25 and 2025-26 provisional revenue budgets. This opening deficit is reflected in all three financial scenarios. As detailed in Section 7, the following key assumptions have been applied in developing a mid-range scenario. Provision for pay awards has been modelled at 3% from 2024-25 onwards for all staff groups. As staff costs represent around 50% of the Council's net revenue expenditure, there is significant financial risk related to pay inflation. A 1% movement on pay awards for all staff groups is approximately £2.5 million. The mid-range scenario assumes no increase in core Scottish Government revenue funding over the period 2024-25 to 2027-28, with a 1% increase assumed in the later years of the plan. The medium-term financial strategy published by the Scottish Government in May projects a £1 billion funding gap in the overall Scottish budget next year, rising to £1.9 billion by 2026-27. While additional funding has been provided for pay awards in the current year, given the pressures in the Scottish budget, there is currently no expectation of a significant uplift in local government funding in future years. The Deputy First Minister announced yesterday that the Scottish Government budget will be published on the 19th of December. Confirmation is currently being sought through COSLA on the likely date for issuing the 2024-25 Provisional Local Government Finance Circular, which details funding at an individual authority level. The equivalent dates last year were 15th of December for the budget statement and 21st of December for the first draft of the circular. The Scottish Government have also previously advised that information on future years will be issued at the same time, but it is not clear whether this will be at an individual authority level. There is also at present no indication of any conditions around future grant funding. The plan makes assumptions on the financial impact of movements in general inflation, demographics, and employee pension costs, on the unwinding of a service concession flexibility, of growth in the council tax base, and in fees and charges. And the mid-range scenario assumes a 3.9% increase in council tax next year and 2025-26, and 3% in subsequent years. This reflects the 3.9% increase approved by Council in March, which was the lowest increase in council tax in Scotland in 2023-24. And at this time, no assumptions have been made for any potential increase in income through new powers to vary the rate of council tax in second homes, or amend the council's non-domestic rates relief policy, as these are future decisions of the council. The Scottish Government and COSLA have also recently undertaken a consultation exercise on a fairer council tax system based on a potential increase in the council tax multipliers for bands E to H. All assumptions, including those in council tax, are for modelling purposes only and will be subject to approval by elected members in setting the revenue and capital budgets. Council is asked to approve the continued refinement of the plan to reflect national negotiations on pay awards, the Scottish Government grant settlement and ongoing work on revenue and capital budgets over the coming months, which will be used to update the assumptions currently being applied. In March, the Council returned to multi-year budgeting, setting a final revenue budget and council tax for 2023-24 and provisional budgets and indicative tax levels for the following 2 years. Members are therefore requested to approve setting a final 2024-25 revenue budget and council tax at the council meeting on the 28th of February, together with provisional revenue budgets and indicative tax levels for 2025-26 and 2026-27. Elected members are also requested to approve setting the capital budget at the same meeting of the council. Elected members will be provided with a summary of previous revenue budget decisions in October and revised revenue budget submissions in November, together with regular updates throughout the budget setting cycle. Work has commenced on restating the provisional revenue budget and capital programme in line with the new executive and strategic leadership structure approved by the Finance and Resources Committee in June. Members will be aware of a significant pressure on the Council's capital investment arising from construction inflation and the doubling of long-term borrowing costs. The capital asset management strategy and asset management plans will be submitted to Council on the 6th of December to support members in their consideration of priorities for capital investment and disinvestment in the context of setting an affordable future capital budget. Section 10 and Appendix C to the report provide information on the Council's cash-backed reserves. Members are asked to approve the submission of an updated reserve strategy to Council on the 28th of February to inform the setting of the revenue budget. As set out in Section 11, work is ongoing in consultation with tenants on updating the Council's social housing budgets. The Council is asked to endorse the setting of a housing revenue account budget and rent levels for 2024-25 and the 5-year housing investment programme at the meeting of the Housing and Social Wellbeing Committee on the 24th of January. The report also outlines the approach to workforce management and progress to date on transformation and change, which is central to responding and adapting to the challenges the Council faces, together with an overview of the significant risks in the Council's financial position. Happy with colleagues to take questions, Provost. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr Mackenzie. First question, Councillor McCall.
Thank you, Provost, and thank you, Mr Mackenzie, for that report. I'm usually a very optimistic person, but I find myself being drawn towards the more medium and, dare I say, pessimistic point of view. But thank you for being so frank. I noticed that on page 181 of the report, item 7.6 addresses the structural deficit and mentions that it's been growing or becoming established over several years. I'm just wondering when, I remember being elected in 2017 and I don't seem to recall being briefed on structural deficit or the issues surrounding it. My memory may be failing, of course, but perhaps you can give me an indication of what it was like back then when I was first elected. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McCall. I'm happy to provide a little bit of background information for yourself and for elected members. So, as I said in my opening remarks, the structural deficit isn't new, but in 2017-18 and 2018-19, there was no structural deficit. We began to report structural deficits really in the face of COVID. The for 2021-22 and 2022-23 at around the £6.1 million mark. VAT grew to £7.6 million, and that was reported last year. Sorry, that was reported in November 2021. My apologies. By October 2022, the structural deficit was just over £10 million, and the latest estimate, which we have in the medium-term financial plan, is £11.954 million. The point is, it's grown over time, but leading back to when you were first elected, Councillor McCall, I think, from memory, there was no structural deficit. I hope that helps.
Thank you. I'm glad my memory isn't failing.
Thank you, Bailey.
Thank you. Sticking with the same paragraph and the same topic, 7.6. 7.6, as we've heard, refers to an estimated nearly 12 million structural deficit going into the next financial year. Does that figure already include the 24-25 funding gap at 1.7 million agreed on March the 1st, or does that need to be added on top of that figure? Thank you.
Thank you, Bailey. That includes the £1.7 million.
Thank you, Councillor Robertson.
Thank you, Provost. I'm aware that the Scottish Government are committed to introducing a local income tax, but I noticed that you've featured the council tax income on page 187. And with regard to the current consultation that's taking place, with regard to the increases that are proposed in bands E, F, G and H, you say it'll be that could generate a substantial amount of money. Have you done an estimate of what that could be? And my understanding from the consultation is they're hoping to introduce that in 2024, so it could be with the next financial year, if I'm right.
Thank you, Councillor Robertson, for the question, and I'm happy to. I was expecting the question, so I'm happy to provide a little bit of context. As members will be aware, the Scottish Government and COSLA have been consulting on a fairer council tax, as we have termed it. That consultation closed in September recently. I'll cut to the chase for ourselves. If we were able to collect council tax at our current levels of collection, and we were to retain all of that council tax income, you're looking at something perhaps in the order of £7.2 million. It is a significant figure for Perth and Kinross. And the reason for that is that the national analysis, which effectively what's being proposed is to rerun what was done in 2017 by the same percentages. So members may recall in 2017 there was a change in council tax multipliers, and this would effectively just rerun the same change at 7.5% for band E, 12.5% for band F, 17.5% for band G, and 22.5% for band H. But the point being that nationally, around 28% of properties are in bands E to H. The percentage in Perth and Kinross is higher, so the potential benefit is higher in terms of revenue collected. If this were to be approved by the Scottish Government, and this is a decision for the Scottish Government, it would apply nationally. It's not local derogation. The level of tax increase would, of course, be with elected members. Thank you. I hope that helps.
Thank you, Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you, Provost. It's a question I haven't asked Stuart Mackenzie for a while, and may seem an old chestnut about pensions, but it is a big ticket item, and it's set out on page 183. It's not about Tayside Pension Fund, where I'm a trustee, although I'm not quite sure when you're hoping to hear what the new contribution rates will be, but it's actually on the teachers' pension scheme. We're talking about possible cost pressure of £750,000 with a 1% increase. But here, the contributions, employers' contributions, are set by the UK Treasury. Now, that's important. Also, the current funding rate is 23%, which I think is pretty high. What potential scope do you see there for not so much of an increase, but possibly of a reduction, which would apply over 4 years? And when, given the timing of the budget process, when are you hoping to hear from the UK government on this?
Thank you, Councillor Donaldson. I'll try and provide the best answer I can, because this is going to sound by definition vague. You're absolutely correct. These rates are set by the UK Treasury. They're not even devolved to the Scottish Government. And they'll be based on actuarial assumptions and the Treasury's own assumptions. I'm mindful also that there's been recent confirmation that the UK cost of servicing UK debt's never been higher. So I'm not optimistic that this will necessarily change. We had a significant rise a few years back. I can't recall exactly when. Colleagues on the call will be able to remind me. But we'll just wait and be advised when we're advised. We have built-in, factored into the medium-term assumptions, an uplift in employers' contribution rates on both schemes. At the moment, there's no indication for the non-teaching scheme, which is administered by Tayside Pension Fund, as you say, of any increased employers' contributions. That's currently 17%. But in terms of a teaching scheme, there's nothing, because it's a national scheme, and it's not funded. It's not a funded scheme. It's a contribution scheme. We don't have any further information at this point in time.
So on this, you're just going to have to wait to hear from the UK Treasury, and there's no timeline on that, because even a 1% reduction over 4 years is £750,000 per annum. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. I don't see any other requests for questions. Therefore, I'll ask the Leader of the Council to move the report.
Thanks, Provost. Provost, a key component of our financial strategy is the medium-term financial plan, which is here before Council today. This Council has a reputation for strong financial management, which has drawn praise from external audit. The continued reviewing and updating of our medium-term financial plan is key to us maintaining that strong financial management. The medium-term financial plan sets out the broad direction of travel for the Council and includes high-level commentary on the macroeconomic conditions that may influence public sector funding over the medium term. It includes the best estimates available at the current time, which will undoubtedly be reviewed and refreshed between now and February, when we set the revenue and capital budget. The medium-term financial plan also signals the formal commencement of the budget process. Provost, I would like to draw elected members' attention to a couple of areas in the report. Firstly, in line with our financial principles, elected members will note that the next February we will be asked to set a 3-year revenue budget for 24-25, 25-26 and 26-27. The setting of multi-year budgets is something that we introduced last year, and I'm delighted that we intend to continue in this vein. It provides early notice to communities and partners of our direction of travel. It also provides more time for officers to bring forward options to, as far as possible, mitigate the impact of what will be some tough decisions over the next few years. Secondly, we are provided with an update on our reserves position. Our prudent use of reserves serves two purposes. On one hand, they provide some form of protection from unexpected events such as severe weather. And on the other hand, it means that we can apply our resources to support our citizens and communities when they need it most. Recently, we have applied these reserves to 3 important initiatives. Firstly, we have provided more support to our residents to help with the cost of living crisis. Secondly, we made good on our commitment to provide support to the Scottish Crannog Centre. And thirdly, alongside the Scottish Government, we were able to provide additional funding to the Y Centre project in Perth City Centre. Provost, as far as possible, we stand ready to apply more reserves if that's what our citizens and communities need. Provost, I commend the medium-term financial plan to the Council.
Thank you very much, Mr. Leader. Mr. Deputy Leader to second.
Thank you, Provost, and thank you to Stuart Mackenzie, Scott Walker, and the rest of the finance team for their, pardon the pun, sterling work in bringing forward this paper, which of course makes for very sobering reading. We as a council, just as our local communities do, we face continuing economic headwinds with resultant high inflation and borrowing rates caused by the disastrous UK budget, and made worse still by the structural deficit that this administration inherited last year. As evidenced last week, we continue to face the ongoing pressures of employee pay inflation. Additionally, P&K faces difficult challenges as a consequence of local demographics, with projected increase of over 23% in the number of local residents aged 80 plus by 2030. Be in no doubt that we, as a council, know that we have really difficult decisions to make at the 2024 budget and beyond. But this administration will be upfront with the people of Perth and Kinross about what we propose to do and why. To be very clear, however, our focus will be on advancing our corporate priorities as were outlined earlier today in the previous paper. In the meantime, I'm very happy to second the recommendations as set out in this paper. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Leader. Incredibly, we don't seem to have any comments. Oh, we do now. Councillor John Rebeck and then Bailey Bailey.
Sorry about that, Provost. I'll just be brief, but it does feel important to note that we have got some very difficult decisions ahead of us. I do believe if we can do it in a collegiate way, insofar as possible, that'll be helpful, because we're all, every one of us in this chamber, are going to have to play with the hand that we're dealt with, always keeping in mind, I think, the most vulnerable and poorest people in our communities. I think that's very important. Of course, Scottish Government, albeit with one hand tied behind their back, will have to do the best they can to make things better. But it does have to be said that it does feel like things are going to be even more difficult the way that Westminster governments have handled the economy in recent years. I think that we do have to say that. It's not just incompetence, actually. It's self-serving, actually, at best, and there are other words that we could use here. But nonetheless, I do think it's important that all of us in this chamber get on with the hand that we're dealt with and do the best that we can. Thank you, Provost.
Bailey Bailey.
Thank you, Provost. I'll keep this short, but the structural deficit didn't come from nowhere, and it certainly didn't come from Holyrood or Westminster, nor did it stop growing after the 2022 local elections. It's us in this chamber who keep voting to grow it. It's 1.6 million higher next year because of the funding gap in the agreed budget. Yes, in spite of what Councillor Drysdale just said about the Tories, his own budget grew the deficit by 15% in March. The reality is that if we keep plugging revenue gaps with one-off funding solutions as we did last year, the deficit will always be with us. Only the budget from Brian and I balance the books for the next financial year, but I'll not go on about it. Provost, thanks.
We're all very grateful. Councillor Liz Barrett.
Thank you, Provost, and thank you to Stuart and Scott and all the teams who've been involved in contributing to this report. As Councillor Rebeck said, the uncertainties we face do seem to be getting worse, and this financial plan can only be a best guess, however well informed by the information available at our future. For example, I had a look at last year, and this time last year, our projection of net financial pressures for the next financial year, that's 24-25, was 34.1 million, but on page 188 of this plan, that's now shot up to 43.6 million, which is an increase of nearly 28% in a year. This is largely a result of the decisions taken on the budget that we set in March 2023. As well as the analysis and key assumptions which Stuart highlighted in section 7 of the paper, I'd ask members to look please very carefully at section 14 from page 198 onwards. The risk assessment confirms that we can't mitigate against all of the many potential significant risks facing the Council, but it does point up again some of the key issues that we must consider when determining the revenue and capital budgets over the next few months for approval at the end of February 2024. Our failure for years to grasp the nettle on realistic increases in council tax is perpetuating our structural deficit, which now stands at nearly 12 million and may increase further even this year. We resorted to the service concession scheme last year, which was a one-off, but this will have to be unwound. We just can't keep propping up revenue and capital spending by dipping into reserves, even for the best of reasons, and not increasing our income. I'm very concerned that the pessimistic scenarios shown here is not pessimistic enough, and I do hope that we as a council will take the brave pill and face up to more hard decisions in the coming months. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barrett. Councillor Jack Welsh.
Thank you, and thank you again to Stuart Mackenzie and Scott Walker. We're at a position just published today in the headlines of a national debt at a 20-year high, that sum being just over £2.6 billion, and 30-year bond prices or rates being at 5%, which is significant impacts for us going forward as a council in terms of borrowing. But in terms of looking at, things that we can do and ultimately things that have been implemented to give us guidance, for some of the things that we can positively take forward for the residents of Perth and Kinross, the community recycling facilities, there was significant talk about these being closed, but just by working very carefully with officers, by reprofiling opening times and identifying when these facilities were needed and used most, we've managed to save over £270,000 and ultimately maintain that service for the residents of Perth and Kinross. These decisions that are going to be taken in the future are going to be hard, but there is light there from the perspective of where savings can be made, and we must be very mindful that we must promote these in a really positive way to the residents of Perth and Kinross. As Councillor Barrett said, Conservatives in the last administration didn't take some of these hard decisions and creative decisions, and maybe we're actually having to feature the consequences of that a bit now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Welsh. Councillor Braw.
Thank you, Provost, and I'll take note of what you said at the beginning, so I should be very polite, but to the point. I first of all thank Mr. Mackenzie and his team for preparing the paper that we have in front of us. This paper contains a mass of information and figures that anyone, even anyone with a little accountancy training, will find very sobering. Given what we have read, I believe that we should not consider anything better than the mid-range predictions herein, which suggest a deficit of 27.5 million for 2024-25. However, there is one sentence in this report that encapsulates the very problem that we and other local authorities face. And that sentence is in paragraph 5.9. It's the last sentence, and I quote, "This means that the future sustainability of public sector funding and Scottish Government expenditure will be increasingly dependent upon the performance of the Scottish economy." That sentence alone is the indictment of a failed government whose obsession with separatism has led to a faltering economy, which will lead to cuts in public services and or higher taxes. In fact, in the paper today, they did announce there will be cuts in public services. And as proof, we are witnessing the failing of the very institutions that form our emergency services, the loss of firefighters and appliances due to budget cuts, the proposed reduction in police numbers due to budget cuts, and people desperately seeking treatment with the NHS. And on top of this, our institution here, which is here to provide the most basic community services, is also struggling under total insufficient funding. No doubt we will be told by the Scottish Government that we are getting increased funding in cash terms, real terms, or any other terms. But all those figures flying around, why are we having to close our toilets? Why can't we cut the grass? Why are we closing recycling depots in certain days of the week? And so on and so on. It just doesn't add up. There are record amounts of money coming from London, but it's not the amount that's coming is important, it's how you spend it. And the waste of public money by this government is inconceivable. And if I may just finish by mentioning, and comments have been made about the deficit of the previous administration, it was that previous administration that maintained reserves, which the current administration is using to help provide services. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you, Councillor Braun. Councillor Collins Stewart.
Thanks, Provost. It's a very brief point. It's a stylistic suggestion for officers when the next iteration of a medium-term financial plan comes forward with these optimistic, mid-range and pessimistic scenarios. On the second page of Appendix B, page 216 of our document packs, an optimistic increase in council tax, or 5% is described as an optimistic increase in council tax, and 2% as a pessimistic one. Can I suggest that that's only if you're spending other people's money, and if not if you're a taxpayer yourself?
Thank you, Councillor Stewart. Councillor Peter Barrett, with the opposing view, perhaps.
Yes, Provost, I'll not be going to Councillor Stewart for any style advice. And I suspect it's only in Mr. Mackenzie's final medium-term financial plan that anybody would offer that to him. I do think that there's numerous cases, if not an epidemic, of selective amnesia in the chamber. I think members of the opposition in the last council term seem to have forgotten the raid to, I think, the tune of something like £6 million that they would have performed on the council's reserves, and that is money that wouldn't have been there, as Councillor Braun says, to address child poverty and the sorts of things that we have been able to do in this council term, and would have led to an actual cliff edge in terms of the shift and dramatic reduction in funding that would have been available to this council moving forward. I was at the COSLA convention on Friday. I heard Shona Robson say that if any political parties had suggestions for ideas of where savings could be made in the Scottish Government so that they could reinvest more money in local government, then she was open to them. Clearly, the £1 billion being thrown away on the unnecessary reorganisation and creation of a national care service is something that could make a dramatic difference to local government's finances. Things like the abolition of standardised testing for a 5-year-old, something that the Parliament voted for, I think, 4 years ago, but has never been enacted, would save £17 million. Maybe not very much in the scheme of things, but I think if parties can actually identify where there is unnecessary spend and spend on failure, that the ferries spring to mind, although that's not going to produce recurring savings for the long term. That the Scottish Government were open to those suggestions. So, I hope that they really are open to those suggestions. I hope that we'll stop engaging in episodes of selective amnesia and come together to actually confront the financial challenges that face us. I've said before that proposing the lowest council tax a rise in Scotland is not the way to approach a £12 million structural deficit. And I don't even think that the most optimistic scenario that we have presented to us in terms of a 5% increase actually addresses that situation with sufficient urgency either. So I do hope that there will be a degree of consensus and political courage demonstrated at the budget next time. That might be wishful thinking, given that there'll be a impending general election, but we can cross our fingers and hope for the best.
Thank you, Councillor Barrett. I think recollections may differ across the chamber on this matter. Leader of the Council has a point of clarification. I hope it is a point of clarification. Microphone, please.
To pick up on Councillor Braun's misinformation there, that when this administration took over, and I'm happy to come up, the reserves were sitting about 2.3%, 2.4%. They're now sitting at 3.8%, so we've not been using reserves up. We've actually built reserves up in the year, and I find it really interesting to not hear about local government funding in England, where we don't have anybody set.
I don't think that's a point of clarification. I think it
I managed to sneak it in.
Yes. Well, I think we'll just stop there. Councillor Tom McEwen.
Thank you, Provost. I'm not one for Strictly Come Dancing, but I think some of the dancing around in this place today. We'll get to the Blackpool Ballroom, I think is where they have their decent things. I never watch it, but I do know about it. Thank you very much. What I read from the paper that's been presented to us is inflation. I think we've heard at the Tory conference about cancelling the VHS too. We've heard about the Scottish Government
today because it was only announced today, so it's definitely not in the paper. So let's stick to what's in the paper.
Let me finish. It'll be in the round. You hear the Scottish Government have had to hold back on dual in the A9. As a council here, we're running a greater deficit, and we've tried to prioritise services that are suitable for the vulnerable. And these are all decisions that have had to be made because of inflation. When inflation runs at 10%, it doesn't matter how much somebody's budget they give you, it doesn't go very far. So inflation is the reason here. It's not budgets, it's not how much money is kicking around the system, it's inflation that is the issue. I've had briefings from Housing Convener for what our projected rent increases for our social tenants will be next year. And it's a number way above what I would like to offer to tenants, but that's where we have to be because of inflation. To wipe our nose, we need to put up rents more than we want to. I listened to Councillor Liz Barrett, regarding the council tax, and I have a lot of sympathy for her for what she has said, that if we keep doing low council tax increases, we'll never have the money. And we have to be brave and look at council tax increases. But we also have to have a look at how do we protect the vulnerable at the same time. So that's my view of the medium-term financial statement at the moment. It's a little bit more complicated and more of a dance than some people are trying to portray in this chamber.
Thank you, Councillor McEwen. Perhaps there'll be some Scottish country dancing at the budget time. We can all hold hands and dance round in circles and sing Kumbaya. Deputy Provost.
Thank you very much. At the risk of attracting the Provost's ire, I just wanted to point out a little fact that I read the other day, which I thought was interesting. Despite the cuts, there are 122 firefighters per 100,000 population in Scotland at the moment. There are 55 in England.
At least you made it brief, Deputy Provost. Councillor Illingworth.
Great, thank you. First comment is about roads winter maintenance. We seem to have an optimism bias inherent. We seem to be always underestimating how much we're going to spend on winter maintenance, and every year we overspend on that. So that's something that the next budget really should look at. A second comment is about Councillor Parrott's comment about firefighters in Scotland. The fact that we have better financed public services in Scotland is entirely down to £10 billion plus per year of fiscal transfer from Scotland to from the UK to Scotland. And your party seems to think that separation from the UK would be a really good idea.
Right, thank you, Councillor Illingworth. That's enough. Councillor Leishman.
Provost, I will absolutely keep it brief. The standard of debate or comment that we've just seen in the last sort of 5-10 minutes, to be honest, has been an absolute shambles. And that comes from both sides of the chamber, because the bottom line that we've got is, regardless of what colour of rosette that we wear, every time that we hear a report with 5,155 children in poverty or 24,000 people working in Perth and Kinross that do not get paid the living wage, and when we walk along the high street and we see exactly what the state of the high street is like for small independent businesses and big business moving away, we've got to absolutely look past that nonsense and we do need to work collectively, as Councillor Rebeck said. But the last 10 minutes has absolutely shown exactly why across Perth and Kinross turnout in wards for local elections is so poor.
Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Provost. Thank you, Mr Mackenzie and the officers for the report. It's a very, very difficult set of numbers, and I hope we can get through this together. Just one point that was made a wee while ago: to go dancing, you really need to get dressed first. It's clear that as a council, we are severely underfunded by our Scottish Government. If the Scottish Government were not hell-bent on avoiding strikes at all costs, we would probably have further means to afford the many initiatives we would like to support as a council, but find that we cannot. We've heard recent representations by our SNP colleagues pontificating about how the Scottish Government do not enjoy the Westminster record of public sector strikes. That is primarily, it's coming to the point.
Sorry, can we not attack each other? I mean, you can attack, if you want to attack national politicians, that's fine. But if we can keep it civil about colleagues in the chamber, please.
I'm trying to. I didn't hear that comment earlier. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I've picked up everyone across the chamber of all political groups.
That's primarily because the UK Government has taken a principled approach and not lying down to bullying unions and unrealistic pay demands. In Scotland, when we're getting close to the wind, the Scottish Government suddenly buckle and find yet another hidden away 60 to 80 million pounds to stop the strikes. That money cannot then come in its rightful direction to the local councils who need it. It needs to stop. It's easy to blame the UK Government when funds are drying up, but at least a more principled approach might allow us to be slightly more optimistic in our aims and give these officers a better chance, whereas actually we're looking at a collegiate set of dreadful circumstances. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Councillor Allen. I don't have any more comments, and Councillor Donaldson, one final comment, and then we are closing up, and it's going to be a brief one, Councillor Donaldson, as well, please.
You're telling me I have to be succinct?
Yes, please. As hard as that may be.
I usually am. Well, sometimes. I think the key thing is that we do face, as a council, quite serious financial constraints, and let's be realistic. And it's not going to be easy over the next 2-3 months in terms of the budget setting process. I think the one thing, though, that when you are in that situation is, and politics is the language of priorities, of political priorities. And I think we have to determine clearly what our priorities are going forward, what we can fund and what we can't fund, and how we can have a sustainable council over the next few years. I'm not going to get into, hitting back at the Conservatives. What I would say is that the Scottish Government does have to balance its books. It does have to produce itself a balanced budget, and that's a major constraint. I think I'd also point out, and I think it's a fair comment to make, is there are severe constraints in Scotland. I think if one looks at the position south of the border, with Section 114s here, there and everywhere, with Moody's indicating recently that there are 20 local authorities that are under not threat of bankruptcy, but basically insolvency. It is a very, very serious situation indeed. So it's, and I really do feel for people in many areas south of the border, and there really has been some mismanagement. It's one thing I think we've got to be clear that we hold to, because there's also been a collapse of the local government audit system, and if you lose control of that and that starts to slip, then I think you get more and more problems. So we've got to be quite resolute in holding to very firm audit standards and be absolutely clear on that. And that is all.
Thank you very much, Councillor Donaldson. Okay, I'm going to come to the Leader of the Council to sum up in a second, but I'm also just going to say to everyone across the chamber, there is obviously a lot more that unites us than divides us in this occasion, particularly our constituents who we are all here to represent. We all are coming at things from a different point of view, but at the end of the day, we all want to get the best for our constituents. I would like to take you all back to the budget day where broadly there was an agreement that it was one of the more conciliatory budgets we've experienced in recent times, and hope that we can go forward in that spirit and be even more conciliatory this coming year. And I hope everyone's got their little political bit out their system for today and we can move forward on that basis. Mr. Leader, do you wish to sum up?
No.
Thank you very much. Right, members, can we agree the report? Thank you very much. There's some nice consensus there. Item 11, Working Smarter Transformation Project, Poolor House Mothballing City Centre Accommodation Options. And I asked for a snappy title and that was it. So thank you very much to Claire and Stephen for that snappy title. I believe Claire Mailer, Director of Strategy, People and Resources, is going to introduce the report.
Thank you, Provost. Everybody hear me okay? The report you've been asked to consider today provides Council with an overview of the work that has been underway in progressing the Council's decision of March this year to effectively mothball Poolor House and deliver savings. The report provides a high-level overview of the financial, space and activity planning and analysis that has been undertaken and highlights some of the risks, issues and indeed potential opportunities that this work has identified over the course of the last few months. The paper provides a background to the Perth office programme, which reduced 7 offices down to 3, and identifies a further reduction in the need for current office accommodation as a result of new post-COVID ways of working. If the paper is agreed, officers will develop a hybrid working policy over the coming months to inform the detailed space planning required going forward. I would also highlight the opportunity presented in the paper to retain a key strategic site within the city centre that will meet the Council's operational requirements. The paper also outlines the wider potential to facilitate our strategic ambition to design and deliver our One Public Estate ambitions through the delivery of more effective and integrated public services. Officers do recognise that more detailed work is required to enable Council to make a more fully informed decision next year. I would also assure you that many of the more detailed questions that some of you have recently asked will be answered as this work is progressed in the coming weeks and months. So, authority is therefore sought from Council to undertake a more detailed options appraisal and prepare a business case to create a public service hub to include the potential purchase of Poolor House. This will be presented to Council for final consideration and decision at a special meeting in August next year. Finally, I would like to thank you for your interest to date in this project. Many of you, I understand, have recently visited Poolor House for a walkabout. The elected member session on Monday was well attended and certainly provided an opportunity to more openly explore the proposals and challenges and consider the opportunities outlined within this paper. Officers have found this engagement extremely valuable and we have committed to ongoing elected member engagement as work progresses in the coming weeks and months. Stephen Crawford, myself and indeed other officers on the call will be happy to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I've got Councillor Forbes for the first question.
Yeah, thanks, Provost. I'm grateful to Bailey for circulating his proposed amendment to us all earlier today. It's an amendment I have some degree of sympathy with, but particularly the first part of it anyway. I just wondered if I could ask quite a specific question. What would it take to get Poolor House to net zero, and roughly what would it cost us to do so?
Councillor, I don't know that at the moment. I mean, it depends on a whole variety of factors, including hydrogen, when and if hydrogen would come to Perth. So that is specifically excluded from the recommendations.
Thanks, Stephen. Maybe a different question then. Is it possible to get a building like Pool House to net zero at the moment or in the next couple of years, do you think? And do you have any idea what the cost of it would be?
A building, I mean, the building is 25-year-old, so it does lend itself to conversion a lot easier than some listed buildings, say this building, for instance. I wouldn't have a cost for that at the moment.
Thank you. Bailey.
Thank you, Provost. Last year, as we'll all remember, we agreed a new corporate plan. At the time, I questioned whether 7 was too many priorities, because good prioritisation is more about what you won't do rather than what you will do. To what extent are we committing to an 8th priority here of being landlord to other public sector bodies, or am I maybe being unfair and this helps us significantly in delivering on one or more of the existing 7 priorities? Thank you.
If I could answer that the concept of the one public estate, one public sector estate, has been around for a number of years. Even in the last few months, the Verity Agreement has come out about public sector working together. Very often these things come down to money and assets and where a team's located. This gives a real opportunity from a building that was built for the council, bespoke 25 years ago. It's got a really good front public entrance. The rest of the building is open plan accommodation. So I think this is a really good opportunity here for the public sector to come together in one location, and that's what the ambition in this paper is.
Mr. Crawford, can you pull your microphone a bit further forward, please, just to make it easier to hear? Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Provost. Probably a daft laddie question. Who owns Pool House?
The company that owns it is a company called IML Limited.
Sorry, is that the same as Canoe House Limited?
Sorry, you can't all speak at the same time. So
in Companies House, they say that they own no land or buildings. And the more I read into it, the more I can't help but think it's the council that owns the building.
I can absolutely confirm that the council does not own the building. The council leases the building.
But again, from whom?
IML Limited.
IML.
Who say that they don't own the building.
I think this would be easier taken offline, perhaps, Councillor Reid, with the head of legal and the head of property. I think that's possibly the best way to get to the bottom of that. Are there any other questions? Billy.
Thank you for indulging a second question. Within the paper, the property at 1 to 5 High Street, the one across the road from here, is ruled out because of the hotel plans and because of the cost of conversion. A couple of years ago, we were told that that building was costing us £143,000 a year to upkeep while it was unoccupied, and also that it was to be converted to a hotel. Can we have a brief update perhaps on both matters, both regarding the progress of turning it to a hotel and the upkeep cost? Thank you.
Councillor, I'll answer on behalf of David Littlejohn. It's obviously there's agreement at council and there's a date that the company, I think Henley, were given to come forward with agreement. I think discussion today, David, was still very optimistic that was moving towards that. But I think I'll refer this back to David to maybe come back to you directly on the detail.
Sorry, the cost of upkeeping the building at the moment while the council owns it.
The upkeep for the building in 22-23 was £88,000.
Thank you. Barbara Renton's indicated she can answer the other part of the question, perhaps.
Thank you, Provost. The current position in terms of 1 to 5 High Street is that the Rogue City Hotels Henley Homes have a development agreement that expires at the end of March next year, after which they are aware that we would seek council support either for a further extension or to remarket the building if Henley Homes withdraws. The viability gap, obviously, in terms of inflation and building inflation in particular, between the development cost and its value on completion has been negative for about a year and therefore too risky for any lender for Henley Homes. However, the developer's latest appraisal suggests that the gap is now smaller than it was 6 months ago, and over the coming months they're hopeful that that gap can be bridged or at least narrowed to an extent where the risk to them is deemed acceptable. Henley's position as of this morning is that they intend to proceed next year.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Renton. Councillor Stewart. Colin Stewart.
Thanks, Provost. I have a few questions, so I'll just carry on until you stop me. No, I'm being stopped by Bailey Brock. Can I just ask, in the first instance, 5.4 of the report talks about work undertaken to close the main city centre public access point and then relocate the specialist CCTV infrastructure. I don't think there was a proposal to close the city centre public access point. It was just it would have been to relocate it. Is that not the case?
Yes, it would be relocated.
Okay, thanks. And then the specialist CCTV infrastructure, from memory on the tour, was an office cubicle of about 9 square metres with a desk and 3 monitors on it. That doesn't sound like a major obstacle in terms of moving out of Pooler House. Is it more complicated than that?
That's a CCTV system, as I understand it, runs the network and is the focal point for the network. And whilst it might have only 3 monitors, I'll have feeds from all sorts of things. It is, you're quite right, it is a small office. It's been tied into that small area, and it can be relocated elsewhere.
Thanks. Then in 5.6, we're excluding other Perth properties such as schools and ALIO accommodation, but they're then specifically included when it comes to option, the options in section 7.1. Why are we talking about excluding them in one place, but then actually revisiting those options later?
In considering all options, we looked at, if we came out of Pooler House, would we have to re-provision other accommodation? Could we go into the ALIO accommodation? Could we go into vacant spaces in the schools? We came to the conclusion in this initial assessment that there was not enough space in the schools to relocate 2,000 square metres. Whereas, as I think I've said in the report, moving to revisiting this in a full business case, we will again look at those assumptions once again.
And then just as you're talking about the assumptions there, one of the things that will need to be done is revisiting the 8,000 square metre space assumption, because that represents, if I'm correct, approximately a 50% increase on as a projected occupancy over the actual current occupancy of the buildings, doesn't it?
The 8,000 square metres was assessed from going round all the managers, team leaders, and assessing what accommodation they required. Now, they were basing that on the way they were currently working or aspired to work. What will inform defining the exact amount of space we require is what is a formal council position on a hybrid working policy and guidelines, and including this, and to To bring this forward to business case, there's a plan to come to committee with a policy first that will then inform a detailed space planning exercise to come up with a more accurate figure of 8,000 or 7,000 or 9,000.
Councillor Stewart, I'll come back to any further questions you have because Councillor Welch wants to come.
Thank you, Provost. On page 222, 5.5, obviously it lays out the some of the options essentially that this purpose of this paper is taking us to, and that date is effectively a burning platform and hard stop of 10th September 2024. Obviously, the three items that are shown there, part of this paper's work over the next period of time will be to develop those. But can I ask the question in terms of purchasing the property at market value, where currently through policies and activities of the UK government, we're going to a cyclical significant downturn in commercial property values, that this may be a very opportune time to purchase a building like that? Thank you.
We've taken advice from independent chartered surveyors on what they anticipate the value to be in 2025. It's certainly, at market price. It's below the bricks and mortar cost of building it at the moment, and yes, it could be an opportune time. But we're here in 2023, and it would be a 2025 market price that would be defined.
Can you switch your microphone?
Sorry, so just to clarify, we'll be able to purchase the building as with current projections at a cost that we wouldn't be able to build that building now?
I believe so.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Collins, you may continue if you have other questions.
Thanks. I think maybe just one more. Sorry, two more. So you were talking, Mr. Crawford, about the aspirational occupancy that was reported back to you from the team leaders and managers and so on. But just to confirm that is more than the current actual occupancy. They were talking about a 50% sort of occupancy rate, whereas our current average is around 30% for the buildings.
In the report, I've said yes. I mean, we do an arbitrary walk round of the building in the morning, in the evening, in the afternoon, and the figures show approximately 30% occupancy across all areas. Some areas are a lot higher populated.
Thanks. And last one. One of the options is that's excluded at the first go. In the options listed on 7.1 is Roman numeral 3. Exit pool house, retain all other potentially surplus and retain all other potentially surplus property and utilise unused capacity in appropriate council locality properties, e.g. town halls, community halls, area offices, locality depots and community learning campus surplus. But that option has been excluded on the basis that it cannot meet the assessed accommodation needs. I would have thought that there must be in all of those locality properties 2,000 square metres of unused space. Is that not the case? Because we could we not move certain corporate functions out of Perth into some of the localities without impacting on, well, it would impact on staff travel, but it wouldn't impact on service delivery if it's a corporate function, for example.
Many of those properties are actually used for other purposes, like community use, or they've got in town halls, communities. 20,000 square feet, 2,000 square feet is a large space, and on the assessment, this initial assessment, we didn't think it was available. As I've said, part of this is going forward and revisiting some of the assumptions beforehand, and I'm quite happy to look at that further.
Thank you. Councillor Cuthbert.
Thank you, Provost. Yes, I'm really pleased to see this report coming forward. My question is, will there be a report coming forward for all the other properties that we've got? We've got a huge portfolio, and throughout the Shire, if I can call it, outside Perth, there's all sorts of questions about capacity of offices and whether we can consolidate there as well. So will we see a report coming forward covering the whole property estate?
It's the intention to review all property assets over time within a report that's aiming to come to council in December. We're currently doing a review in Pitlochry. We've launched that, and that's looking at all asset bases in Pitlochry and looking at the communities and the community need. And our intention is to work right through all property across Perth and Kinross. This is brought to you, or brought to members, because we have got this contract issue, because we've got a very live question of what is hybrid working, how much space do we actually need. So some of them will be taken forward on a locality basis, other ones will come forward on a service basis, such as the depot review, which is currently underway.
Thank you for that. I look forward to seeing the report.
Okay, thank you very much. I don't see any further questions, and therefore I'm going to invite Leader of the Council to move the report.
I echo what Claire Mailer said about the way that the officers presented this before and did briefing sessions, because it managed to cut down the number of questions that everybody asked there, because I think it would have went on for a lot longer if we hadn't had sight of maybe Councillor Stewart missed the memo that there was a briefing session, but apart from that, it's valid to ask questions and continue to ask them out with this chamber as they arise or come to you. Provost, I agree to pausing the instruction from March 2023 to mothball Poor House from April 2024. It was a way of forcing this discussion, which we're all having now, instead of pushing it back. I think officers have now brought this paper forward after proceeding with the instruction of Council in March 2023, and I welcome the twin track approach that was outlined there by Stephen Crawford, where we will proceed with looking to make a one public sector estate, but at the same time, if that is not feasible, we will be moving to make the provision to move out of Poor House in 2025 if the figures don't stack up and the numbers don't stack up. Footfall in Perth City Centre, which could be a benefit if we're bringing agencies from out on the verge of the town to come in to be in the centre of town and revitalise our city centre. So I'm really pleased with this approach, and I'm pleased that we as a council took this decision in March, or we might not have been at this point. We might have been looking at it in a year's time when it was too late. So thanks everybody for backing that. There are enough opportunities presented today to instruct the development of a business case for consideration next year to retain Poor House. I support the principle of the development of a public sector hub in Poor House in Perth, which I believe will bring much benefit and cohesion to public sector service delivery in Perth. I'm aware of interest from other public sector partners and recognise that the previous decision does not support this approach. I also support the prudent approach from officers to concurrently develop a plan B should the business case not be viable. I agree that this should be brought back to Council on or before August 2024. Key to this business case is the agreement in Perth and Kinross of a hybrid working policy, and I know that it is planned for later this year to inform the Poor House decision. I look forward to the policy being presented. Regardless of whether we decide to retain or exit Poor House as an operational building, more detailed space planning work needs to be carried out alongside an approved hybrid working policy to ensure that our future operating model is effective and that our office property estate is fit for purpose. The drawdown of the reserves funding will facilitate this. Provost, I commend the Working Smarter Transformation Project, Poor House Mothballing, / City Centre accommodation options. Thanks, Claire.
Mr. Deputy Leader.
Certainly agree with that last comment. Thank you. Yeah. First of all, I would very much like to thank Stephen Crawford and his team for the considerable work that has already been undertaken to bring forward these recommendations today. This council's city centre office accommodation, and Poor House in particular, has for 25 years
both been a very significant cost to PKC, but also a major contributor to the footfall and vibrancy of Perth city centre. In this post-pandemic world where hybrid working has become more of a norm, it is right that this council formalises its own hybrid working policy. This will come forward for approval early in the new year and will obviously impact the council's future office capacity requirements. Therefore, with a view to both reducing the council's property costs and at the same time boosting city centre footfall, it is important that the principle of the development of a public service hub is agreed in principle today, pursued and promulgated. If council supports the recommendations in this paper today, a business case will be developed to include the potential purchase of Pooler House for consideration and decision at a special council meeting in August next year. If this business case is not deemed viable by council, a relocation of staff from October 2024 and subsequent termination of the lease arrangement on 10th of September 2025 will need to follow. I'm happy to second this motion.
Thank you very much, Councillor Drysdale. I have an amendment by Bailey. Do committee services have a copy of your amendment that we can put on the screen? Thank you. Can we do that, please?
Thank you, Provost. I support the proposal today, and I'd like to propose two enhancements to our route forward here. Thank you to officers, especially Stephen Crawford and Scott Walker, for their help in putting this amendment together. For a short amendment, it took a lot of tweaking. One of those tweaks just happened in the last few hours. So please note that what's on screen differs from what I shared earlier in regard to cost recovery. Might be the only one who can point at this, but the wording there. We must ensure that the council achieves full cost recovery for the rented space. Secondly, we must ensure that the office space we're letting out helps our public sector partners to ensure to deliver their net zero aims. Let me clarify that the first part here isn't about turning a profit. It's about recognising that the council, and by extension local taxpayers, have already paid a lot of money to get us to the point where we can buy this building at this preferential price. After any window when partners join us in the building is over, we'll also have ongoing costs such as borrowing costs too. This amendment establishes that the cost base we use for setting our rental rates includes our total cost of owning and operating the building. Failing to do so would mean we're subsidising other public services, subsidising them with the very money that is hard fought for, no matter which Parliament didn't award it to us. So this amendment looks to achieve a very careful balance. We don't want to sell ourselves cheap, but at the same time, I'd be very upset if anyone thought I was setting up PKC PLC here. The second part acknowledges that just like us, other public bodies and charities are also seeking to achieve net zero. The SWOT analysis contained in the papers in front of you highlight the lack of net zero credentials as problematic. Let's head that off at the pass by proactively working with partners on net zero so they can join us on this journey without worrying that the new office accommodation won't meet their climate targets. And in response to the good question from Councillor Forbes earlier, the building itself doesn't necessarily need work, but if we can create a net zero heat source or energy source, such as within the Tay or a heat pump, that can also achieve the goals as well. So it doesn't necessarily mean rebuilding the building. You can achieve net zero by providing a new energy source that's renewable. My aim here is to steer this council towards a business plan that will both meet the council's requirement when we meet in August next year, and which will enable other public sector partners to continue their great work, also on a lower cost base, thanks to the goodwill of this council. And the amendments as per the screen. Thank you.
Thank you, Bailey. Councillor Leishman, you're seconding Bailey, and then I'll come to Councillor Collins-Stewart with a point of clarification. So,
thanks very much, Provost. Happy to second. Nothing to add.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Collins-Stewart.
Thanks, Provost. So I don't know whether this is a point of clarification for officers or for Bailey, but the wording of the amendment that was circulated earlier was talking about maximum possible level of income, which is probably more than we would seek to get from public partners joining us in taking space in Pooler House. However, the new wording talks about the maximum possible level of cost recovery, which would be, if I'm not mistaken, less than the building would actually cost us, because unless we were to buy it and rent the whole thing out, we are going to not cover our costs. So this is actually has moved from a profit-making to a amendment to a loss-making amendment. Is that correct?
Bailey, you want to answer this?
Yeah, I can address that. Thank you. So it was previously about maximising income, so the top line. Now it's about maximising the cost, so the bottom line on which we set our charging. So it's no longer about making, it's not by any means about making a loss, but it's about setting that that floor that represents our true cost of owning the building, and then setting the income rates accordingly. So we just want to be clear that here the motivation is about achieving full cost recovery of what it costs the council to operate and own the building over the whole period, rather than just the period when they're occupying. Thank you.
I think my understanding is this was advice from officers about that would fit in with the work that they're going to do. So that's why the wording has been tweaked slightly. Okay, I've got comments from Councillor Roberts first.
Thank you, Provost. I thought this was a very, very good report. I have to say I'm not really that happy about the amendment. I think it shackles our officers in delivering the recommendations within the report. I think we should give them free rein to do the best and address what the report says. I thought the presentation on Monday was excellent, and it gave us a chance to think about things in preparation for today, so I'm grateful for that. The only other thing I would like to say was that part of the equation in redesigning our office accommodation in Perth surely is to do with the economic impact that our premises have within the city of Perth itself. So I think that should be part of the equation, because if I think I would like the officers to bear that in mind, that it's very important for the retention of many of our premises, our business premises, shops, that we actually keep a good presence within Perth, and I'd like that to be part of the equation when you're working this away through this programme. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Robertson. I think you can see that officers very much have had that in mind, and you can see that detail in the SWOT analysis. And obviously, the proposal is certainly not to, or certainly officers' proposal and the paper's proposal is not to reduce the number of staff working in Perth City Centre. It may be a case of they would work in other buildings potentially, but the paper is quite clear that officers are considering that. Councillor Liz Barrett next.
Thank you, Provost. I oppose the amendment and support the recommendations of the paper as they've been presented to the council, and I'd like to thank Stephen Crawford and the team for the paper and the work behind it, and also the briefings that we've had and the tour of Pooler House, which was really useful. Looking at the amendments as proposed by Bailey and amended, my concerns regarding the first addition are that a requirement to maximise cost recovery may not represent the best outcome for the council or those public sector bodies with whom we hope to share the building, or the local community, as highlighted by Councillor Robertson just now. We should be seeking best value for our communities, and that's not necessarily done by mandating that we maximise the cost recovery from the Pooler House building. I completely support the principle of cost sharing for public sector hubs, which will include the costs of net zero works once they've been identified. It also means that we're sharing the risks associated with the very uncertain times that we face, as we've just discussed in our review of the medium-term financial plan. The proposal also follows the principles of the recent Verity House Agreement between the Scottish Government and local government to provide sustainable, person-centred public service. It's an exciting opportunity for us to support collaborative working and building of closer relationships with our public sector and charity partners. Regarding Resolution 2, we haven't had evidence that it will be difficult to persuade other public bodies to take accommodation that isn't set net zero at this juncture, as so very few buildings are net zero at this time. We do absolutely want to move towards net zero in all our buildings, and the corporate delivery and improvement plan that we've just reviewed and the climate action plan are moving forward with the review of all the council estate, with quick wins identified already to reduce our environmental impact, and we look forward to the report that's coming to council on the estate in December. Bailey's amendments a direction that officers work with potential partners to fund and realise net zero ambitions for Pooler House. That's fund and realise in order to make it a more attractive proposition to potential tenants, not partners. Paragraph 6.3 of the paper already addresses the commitment of officers to move to implement more integrated working for delivery of our shared priorities around poverty, net zero and growing our city economy. The amendment implies a commitment to funding on these before the potential partners are in place and isn't needed, and ask Council if they'd please accept the paper as it stands. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. It's not a comment, it's you want to come in on the amendment specifically in terms of to incorporate it. Sorry. If you want to indicate that now so that the people when they're having the debate can have that, and if anyone wants to prepare an amendment, they can do so if that is what you wish to do.
Thanks, Provost. Yeah, after speaking with officers as well, and the benefit of amendments coming forward today, we've not had to have recesses because amendments have been made aware before to the administration before we've come into the chamber. I've discussed it with officers and with Councillor Bailey, and I am happy to accept his amendment into the motion.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Drysdale, are you also in agreement with that? Okay, thank you. Right, Councillor Welch, you're next on my list.
Thank you, Provost.
Sorry, Councillor Peter Barrett's put a point of order in the chat, which takes precedence over comments.
Thanks, Provost, and I would just like to see in light of what the leader of the council has said, that would be my intention to move the recommendations of the paper and speak to that at the appropriate time.
That's fine. Would you like to do that now before everyone else comments as well then, as an amendment?
If you think that's appropriate, Provost, yeah, sure.
Happy for that.
Provost, I admit that my group supported the budget motion put forward by the administration, which included the proposal to mothball Pooler House. So I do accept my share of the blame for getting us into the pickle that we find ourselves today, and having to unravel that, or this particular tangle that members have created. In the past, I have expressed concerns about political groups developing major budget savings proposals which aren't tested rigorously by officers or subjected to bigger picture considerations and SWOT analysis. And I don't share Councillor Lane's view that it was a good thing that we went about it in this way. I think we could probably have made much more substantial progress in terms of taking forward partnership arrangements for Pooler House if we hadn't been saddled with the mothballing decision. But we are where we are. Provost, there's a time for members to step back and let officers to get on with their jobs, and there's a time to provide a clear political steer, but there's never time to meddle. And Bailey's amendment is meddlesome and it's misguided. I appreciate that he took the time to inform me this morning that he was intending to put forward an amendment, and he was courteous enough to send me a copy of it at the time. But Within the email that he sent me, it was clear that Bailey's intention was that we should look to achieve more than cost recovery for the cheap window of ownership of the building. Several hours later, and that's now changed, but I don't think that Bailey's rationale or determination behind this motion has changed. It's just that that was simply incompetent, so we're being best presented with Bailey's next best wizard wheeze.
I'm sorry, Councillor Barrett, can we have a bit of respect for other members, please? Everyone, we're trying to have everyone be respectful. If you can also please be respectful.
I apologise if that phrase was not considered appropriate, Provost, but I don't think it's the job of this council to try and rectify what he feels are the costs of a 20-year-old PFI contract by trying to gouge a few more pennies out of the pockets of our potential partners. This is about delivering best value for the future. It is about taking forward the One Public Estate agenda and ensuring that our city centre continues to benefit from the spending power of people working in our city centre. We shouldn't fall victim to a proposal which pushes officers towards demanding the equivalent of a full repairing and improving lease, dressed up as a means of achieving net zero performance for Puller House. As we've heard in the response to the questions, Provost, I don't know, and in fact it doesn't seem like anybody knows, where Puller House would sit in terms of priority for net zero investment compared to any other property we might own. It could be years down the line. Potential partners could have come and gone after being involved in Puller House for a period of years before the net zero aspect actually has any financial impact on them. This amendment puts Puller House at the top of the net zero investment list when it might be more expensive or technically difficult than other buildings to tackle. And trying to achieve more than cost recovery from a shared hub from potential partners will torpedo any chances of its success. It's putting unnecessary barriers in the way of delivering such a hub. Provost, I appreciate the lengths that Councillor Lang goes to try and accommodate a broad spectrum of political opinion and to harness the best ideas from all parties. But there is a time to say no. There is a time to say, actually, Alistair, this is a terrible idea and we're not doing it, and now is the time. So, Provost, I'm very happy to support the recommendations of the paper and not the amendment.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Barrett. Do you have a seconder? Okay, we've got Councillor Liz Barrett seconding. Thank you. Councillor Peter Barrett, can you switch your microphone off, please? Okay, thank you. Okay. Yeah, since you've already spoken, I was just accepting a formal seconding, if that's okay. Thank you. Councillor Jack Welsh.
Thank you, Provost. I think sometimes you get wrapped up into costs rather than benefits and opportunities. My comment would be that that we should, I think, and I expect and suspect that the figures will back this up, that the building will be available to us at an opportune price. That the cost and the opportunity to make it a net zero building and therefore enhance its opportunities for a higher than market average rent and tenancy, and more importantly for it to be a building in a prime location in Perth to be very attractive to tenants and occupants, offers a fantastic opportunity. In terms of the amendment, in principle I understand what Bailey is trying to do. And I think we need to consider that in the overall picture of what this paper seeks to do, and ultimately, obviously, make a decision on that basis. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Forbes next, please.
Thanks, Provost. I was going to say that it was good to have a debate where we can all contribute sensibly and proactively to something which is of importance to the council, unlike the last debate where the SNP just seemed to moan about everybody else to themselves. Barrett's comments, I think
Councillor Forbes, you were doing well up to that point. Can we return to that part and just pretend the last bit didn't happen?
We've moved on, Provost. We're okay. Thank you. So I do have some sympathy with the amendment and the motion, and I think I'll take some time through the recess to decide how to vote on that. But I'm delighted that the Leader of the Council has recognised the value in having a large office block full of council or other public service staff in the middle of Perth. I think Councillor Leishman said something earlier. I didn't write down what he said, but it was certainly supportive of that idea. I think everyone knows I've been a fan of keeping Pooler House within the Perth and Kinross Council asset list for some time. My only request to Stephen and his colleagues when they're doing the work they're about to do is, when this is all over and when it's all done, I'll be really disappointed if we walk through Pooler House and see acres of empty desks. In fact, I'll probably be beyond disappointed and quite angry. So when you're working out the amount of space that you need and how many people are coming in to work, I'd like you to consider that. And I don't think it's going to help our high street at all if we have a building which lies pretty much empty. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Illingworth.
Thank you, Provost. I really like the proposal being put forward in the paper. It effectively makes us landlords to other public sector bodies for office space. Now, within Perth, there's a surplus of office space. There's lots of other companies that have got vacant areas. And so the owners of, we're going to be moving into a competitive situation where owners of other properties around Perth are going to be saying to our potential customers, we can do cheaper than they can. Now, even if that means us losing money, we will still be better off offering less than cost price on the basis that marginal cost, this is, undergraduate economics, your marginal, as long as your marginal revenue is in excess of your marginal costs, you are still better off, but obviously not as well off as when we're covering our costs. So my concern about Bailey's amendment is that it ties the hands of officers when coming to a commercial agreement. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Illingworth. Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Provost. I actually wrote this before the motion amendment was applied, so please forgive me. Largely in support of the motion, the rent levels where appropriate for third parties, they need to be absolutely right. Getting all of our services into one or two central hubs is the ideal scenario for Perth and Kinross Council and the city centre. Acquiring Pooler House and filling it with all our ancillary services and preferred third-party occupants is the optimum solution for us. Get the rents right and we can make the vacant space attractive to strategic partners, startups, shared space, etc. Getting the people into these two spaces will be fantastic for Perth City Centre. Let's fill them, get a buzz back in the place. I wish you well with the opportunity through the report, Stephen, and your team, and I hope it's successful. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Allen. I think I now only have Bailey with the right of reply and then the Leader of the Council to sum up, and Councillor Barrett, sorry, also to sum up as well. So I'll come to Bailey, then Councillor Barrett, and then Councillor Lane, and then we'll have a recess. Or do people fully sum up? Do people wish a recess now? Right, okay. Bailey.
Thank you for the right to reply, Provost. On point of fact, the change of wording from maximising income to maximising cost recovery was motivated by Councillor McEwen, who was good enough to share his concerns directly with me about the original draft. On reflection, I realised my original wording was indeed open to that misinterpretation. Both versions were competent. The change was to ensure it was clear to all that my motivation was not to seek profit. That was always my aim. I do take offence from the fact that my motivations have been dissected here in public, when I think it's clear enough to all that the amendment is motivated solely by a wish to do right by both the climate and local taxpayers. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you, Bailey. Councillor Peter Barrett.
Thanks, Provost, and I didn't mean to impugn Bailey's integrity, so I apologise if he thinks I did that. I think Councillor Illingworth has hit the nail on the head. This is, as I said previously, about achieving best value and not maximising cost recovery, and that's the approach that we should take. It's the approach that we take in how we deal with our ALIOs and other partner organisations. So we don't require full cost of recovery, but we do, as Councillor Liz Barrett said, want to ensure that we deliver best value, and I think we also want to give the creation of this public sector hub the best possible chance of success. And my concern is if we go down the route put forward by Bailey, then we will be doomed to failure. So let's keep it simple.
Thank you, Councillor Barrett. Councillor Ling.
Thanks, Provost. I'm content to continue with the amendment and to the motion in place, and I feel that it will be a selling point to mention of net zero to show cognisance that we're working towards that, and we'll be working towards it with partners who will need to work towards it as well. I'm concerned about not looking for full cost recovery. We just had a debate on medium-term financial plan, and the reason that we were looking at we can't afford to spend £3.5 million for a third occupied building. So to paint ourselves in a corner to accept that we're going to lose money by continuing in this area does not make financial sense, and we just had that debate. So I'm happy to move forward with the revised motion. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. Right, we're going to have a 10-minute recess because I think that's a realistic time. So we'll reconvene at 10 past. Take your seats, please, everybody. Okay, members, we have agreed a consensus across the chamber. I'm told. Therefore, under Standing Order 2.1b, I'm moving a suspension of Standing Order 16.1 to allow the Leader of the Council to do his summing up again to accept the revisions to his motion. This requires a 2/3 vote by members by roll call. Therefore, I'm going to ask the clerk just to do a roll call vote. The standing order requires a roll call vote. Yes, I'm afraid so.
Thank you, Provost. So in relation to, as you've said, Standing Order 2.8, can I ask councillors to confirm whether they're voting for or against the suspension of standing orders to allow the mover of the motion and the seconder to further amend their motion? Bailey Ahern.
For.
Councillor Allen.
For.
Councillor Anderson.
For.
Bailey.
For.
Councillor Liz Barrett.
For.
Councillor Peter Barrett.
For.
Councillor Braun.
For.
Bailey Brock. Councillor Carr.
For.
Councillor Chan.
For.
Councillor Cuthbert. Councillor Donaldson.
For.
Councillor Drysdale.
For.
Councillor Forbes. For. Councillor Frampton.
For.
Councillor Freshwater.
For.
Councillor Harvey.
For.
Councillor Illingworth.
For.
Councillor James.
For.
Councillor Craigali.
For.
Councillor Lane.
For.
Councillor Leishman.
For.
Councillor McPherson.
For.
Councillor Massey.
For.
Councillor McCool.
For.
Provost,
For.
Councillor McEwen, Deputy Provost,
For.
Councillor Rebeck, for, Councillor Reid,
He's had to leave.
okay. Councillor Robertson,
For.
Councillor Shires,
For.
Councillor Smith,
For.
Councillor Colin Stewart,
For.
Councillor Grant Stewart,
For.
Councillor Waters,
For.
and Councillor Welsh.
For.
Provost, we have 36 unanimous votes for the motion, so standing orders are therefore suspended in relation to this particular item.
Thank you. Mr. Leader, would you like to detail the changes?
Yes, thanks very much. It's been a momentous day for me in the council. I can't believe that 36 people want to hear me talk again. So thanks for that. And the same day where Councillor Barrett said I was too collegiate, which is another thing I never thought I'd hear within the council chamber. But no, thanks again, everybody, for working together and coming to a point I think that we can all agree on. Everybody's seen what's proposed, but committee services worked very quickly behind the scenes, and this is now the motion that I wish to put forward. Is everybody comfortable with that? To save me having to read it out, you'll see there's a couple of revisions. They are Seek 2 has been inserted from in between shall achieve. You will see also that to fund has been removed and replaced with to, and partners has replaced tenants in the last line. So hopefully everybody can agree with the new motion.
Councillor Barrett.
Just to confirm, we'll withdraw our amendment.
Thank you. Councillor Drysdale, yes, happy.
Sorry.
Yep.
Yes, I support withdrawing our amendment.
Councillors, can we agree the revised motion? Thank you very much. Right, item 12, appointments to committees and outside bodies. Are members in agreement with the proposed changes to the committees and outside bodies as set out on the agenda?
Okay.
Thank you. Item 13, changes to 2024 committee timetable. They are as per on the agenda. Can we agree those changes? Thank you. Item 14, elected member briefing notes. Can we agree the briefing notes as received since 30th of August 2023 as set out on the agenda? Thank you. That concludes today's council meeting. Have a safe journey home.